Welcome back to the Metro on 1019 WDET-FM. I'm Tia Graham. And when you look good, you feel good. The confidence someone displays when they're in that good dress or perfect fitting pair of jeans, it can be felt. So when we think about being dandy, most may not think about clothing. Yet dandyism was a way of expressing confidence in personal revolutions within oneself. Born out of the struggles of enslavement, Black Americans found power in the way they presented themselves post-slavery, during Reconstruction, the Harlem Renaissance, and beyond. Dressing well wasn't up for a debate. It was a way of life. Dandyism wasn't just Black American style either. Asian and Latin Americans were also a part of the movement. Through Black dandyism, though, the idea that dressing well was a way to reclaim Blackness, and it has stuck through the test of times and has evolved with it. But why do I bring all this up? Earlier this week, the Metropolitan Museum of American Art hosted its yearly gala as part of its fundraising efforts for the museum. And each year, a different theme is chosen. And the who's who of Hollywood attend that event dressed to the nines. And this year's theme, you may have guessed it, is Superfine, tailoring Black style. And the accompanying dress code was Tailored for You. So joining us in the studio right now to talk a little bit more about it is Africa Liz Johnson. She is an entertainment consultant, former manager, and publicist. She's also the owner of FTA Gallery, which recently went through a merger. Liz attended this year's event consulting for Miss Lauryn Hill and legendary rapper Slick Rick. Liz, welcome to the Metro.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning. So for those who don't know, what is the purpose of the Met Gala? What does it aim to do?
So the Met Gala is a charity event, and it aims to raise money for the Metropolitan Museum and the exhibit that they display each year, which typically dictates the theme for the Met Gala. This year's theme was, as you know, Black Dandyism, tailoring Black style. And in fact, they actually raised the most money in Met history this year, which further proves the power of the Black dollar. I believe they raised $71 million. Last year, they raised the least money, and I think there's something to be said about that, considering the theme and what it was meant to highlight.
I mean, wow. I had no idea that much money had been raised at this year's event. And just like you said, Black dandyism was the theme. So talk to us about Black dandyism and what it means for those who don't understand the term.
So dandyism is basically superfine tailoring. Think suits and blazers and top hats and well-polished shoes and very detailed when it comes to cufflinks and the pants. And dandyism, in fact, is a big subculture in the Congo, right? Like, I'm West African, I'm Liberian, and African culture in general, our men, our women, we're known for being in the best despite socioeconomic status. Like, we believe in really being well put together. But in Congo specifically, that is a whole subculture. I was a little disappointed because no one really paid homage to that for this year's Met Gala. It would have been great to see people lean more towards the originator of that, or just African fashion in general. But that is essentially what dandyism is. It's just being well put together, well polished, super clean.
And I want to touch base on that one, and extend on that a little bit. The connections there in the diaspora through clothing, because as I was looking through, like you said, once you gave me the idea, the Congo dandy man, I thought, well, let me look and look at the diaspora. And there were so many different examples of what dandy was based on a different country within Africa, based on, honestly, the colonizer who happened to take over that country at that moment and how that style kind of developed. Can we talk a little bit about that connection in the diaspora through the clothing and how adornment is so important?
Yeah, when you look good, you feel good. And I think Africans have found a way to use fashion not only as a way of expression, but just a way of uplifting themselves and mental health. A lot of those countries are struck by poverty, but when you see someone from Congo, or let's say where I'm from, Liberia, which is probably one of the top 15 poorest country in the world, when you look at our people, you don't get that. And maybe that there's also something to be said about how they look at life, not from a materialistic standpoint, and also from a skill set, right? Like a lot of my aunts and my cousins are well skilled when it comes to tailoring. Like my cousin can sew. Like I watched her make like her Halloween costume. She made herself into a strawberry, but the attention to details, you know, we've been able, as Africans in the diaspora, we've been able to make the best of what we have. And as a result, you kind of have to learn how to do it with your hands and make do with what you have.
So let's transition here, if we can, and talk about the event itself. The Met Gala was this past Monday, and the stars were out. But let's talk about this year's event, Dandyism, as that theme. I saw so many different styles and so many different iterations of what they thought dandyism was, yet we still hear from social media in general that the standards weren't there. So can we talk a little bit about what we saw and some of the reasons why some folks were disappointed?
Did some people understand the assignment? Yes. But in my opinion, many did not. And I think there's a few reasons for that. One, the people that really should have been there weren't there, right? Like Slick Rick, for example, should have been at the Met Gala. He is the epitome of dandyism, especially within American culture. Yeah. And then you have people who are not as connected, and quite frankly, based on the outfits, I don't know if their stylist or their team really did the research on what dandyism is. So in my opinion, I think that was a reflection of the fact that there were many people at the table, specifically this year, that probably, I don't want to say they shouldn't have been there, but someone else could have taken those seats, in my opinion.
Yeah, and just based on, like you said, some of the outfit choices compared to what the theme actually was, it truly was the fact that there's a lack of understanding of what dandyism meant and what it means to the Black community then and now.
Yeah, and it's also too, you and I talked about this offline too, it's just the gatekeepers, right, for the Met, and the people who have the say-so in who goes and who don't go. I don't think they were 100% well-versed when it comes to the culture and what certain people means to our culture, right? So, and that's a part of the issue in a sense with entertainment, fashion in general. There are a lot of gatekeepers that don't truly understand culture, but yet they have so much say-so in what is the culture.
And, just thinking about the gatekeeping, because I was actually surprised to hear the theme this year for the Met Gala and it being a little bit more inclusive in terms of it being presented that way. Can you talk about just the presentation of having a more inclusive Met Gala?
Well, I have so many thoughts on the idea of inclusivity in fashion in general, because a lot of it, quite frankly, has been very performative. Even with the Met Gala, right? I personally had an issue with the fact that there was a Vogue issue catered to the Met Gala, and there were a few people, and I don't know if everyone else noticed, but there were a few people in that Met Gala issue that weren't at the Met. And so just to give the listeners a little insight, oftentimes when you see a magazine cover, it's typically shot 4 to 6 months in advance. So with that issue, it's probably shot sometime last year. Now, if I was one of the talent in that issue, I'm thinking, oh, this is a Met Gala issue. I'm certainly going to get a ticket. But it doesn't work like that. So with the Met, typically you're invited by a brand or the sponsors. 1 year TikTok was a sponsor, so TikTok will have a table. YouTube is typically a sponsor. They will have a table, or whoever the co-chair is. Once you get the invite, it doesn't mean you're going, because you still have to be approved by the ultimate gatekeeper, which is the editor-in-chief of Vogue and her team. A designer can want you there and be willing to pay $100,000 for your ticket, but if she doesn't approve, you're still not going. And I don't know if that's necessarily a fair process, especially with this year's theme, because some brands have made more efforts to truly understand our culture, and they have people on their teams that really understand who should have been there, who shouldn't have been there. But when the people at the top are like, we don't know, or like and for the sake of privacy, I'm not going to give specific names of people that should have been there or that were invited by a brand and she said no. But I think that is a part of the system that I don't necessarily agree with, which is why I've started my company to, one, put more of us at the forefront, because there is a system, there is a game that we're not 100% knowledgeable on. So we're kind of in it. We don't know the rules. We don't know how it goes. And sometimes it takes a hit to our self-esteem, and you kind of find yourself begging for a seat at the table, but you don't really know how to go about getting that invitation. But I also do think that, just considering this theme and how much money was raised, it would be nice if a publication like Essence or Ebony partnered with a museum, maybe like the African American Museum, and we kind of had our own version of the Met, because it's very much so a game of begging for a seat at the table every year.
And, that's one thing that I'm going to get to with you in just a moment. You're listening to the Metro on WDET, Detroit Public Radio. I'm Tia Graham. We're talking about this year's Met Gala theme, Dandyism. Our guest is Africa Liz Johnson. And Africa Liz Johnson is an entertainment consultant, former manager, and a publicist. She is also the owner of FTA Gallery, which recently went through a merger. But I do want to talk to you about what you just said, because I was trying to find a way to formulate that question. What needs to be done, or how can new lanes and new avenues open up, and what would that look like for more people, especially Black people and especially people of color, to see themselves in the way that others see themselves at the Met Gala?
I think it's about looking at this in a way from a partnership stance, right? There's already a system. Can we completely dismantle it, burn it down? Highly unlikely, just trying to be a realist. But I believe there's a way where we can become partners while simultaneously also doing our own thing, right? Like and even for myself, and seeing the impact that my clients have had on culture, or the impact that they've had on sales by working with a specific brand, we have that power. But there also needs to be more of us, or more allies, like true allies, not the performative aspect, who are willing to build and take inspiration and knowledge from what currently is, but make it our own. So, for example, with myself, before I built my company, I was working in-house to really, truly understand what the lay of the land is. And I believe that we need to build more of our own. And every now and then we can dip in and out, but there are so many different events, like even with the Grammys, like you have the Latin Grammys, like we could potentially, especially now with like African diaspora music becoming such a global thing, like we should have African Grammys, right? So I think it's about really cultivating our own spaces. And I know people have been saying that a lot more, but as someone who is really in it, there aren't many people that truly care to break away and do that. Only person, there's a few people, but one person that I can really identify that have kind of done that in a sense to really take ownership is one of my mentors and my colleagues. His name is Kendall Warts. He's actually from Detroit. He grew up in the Jeffries Projects, and he was the head of celebrity and image at Wilhelmina Models for some years. And he just didn't like a lot of things about the system, so he broke away and he actually started his own company, and it's called the Jeffries. So he named it after the projects that he grew up in Detroit. And he has clients ranging from everyone, Evan Mock, who is a pro skateboarder and an actor, to Julia Fox. And he's been able to take everything he's learned from working at Wilhelmina, but also just growing up in Detroit and his understanding of culture and glamour and the entertainment, and he's been able to apply that. And he and I actually started our companies around the same time because he was an agent for a client of mine at the time, and we would just always talk about what we like and what we didn't like about the system. We were like, finally, I think we're just going to do it on our own because it's not as hard as people think, and we both did it with no funding. I think that's another barrier that a lot of us, because we don't come from generational wealth, we feel like we need X amount of dollars before we can really get started. And I started a Fair Gallery with no money. Kendall started the Jeffries with no money, but we've been able to build it into something where now we're closing 5, 6, 7-figure deals on the regular. And we've been able to just self-fund our companies through that way. So I think it's just having the confidence to make a bet on yourself, but there needs to be more of us. People need to see more of us and say, hey, like Kendall is doing this, Africa is doing this. But it's also like in our communities, we don't grow up knowing that, hey, you don't only have to go to school to be a lawyer or a doctor. You could grow up and become a creative consultant. You could grow up and become a publicist. You could grow up and become a film producer, and it's actually very lucrative. Some of my colleagues are making more than a doctor or a teacher. So I think it's just more about the education process of it and bringing back the arts into school too, for example, I think will really play a key role into that because
unfortunately, we do got to let you go here, but I want to say thank you so much. And you are a new person I'm going to call and talk to you about things that are going on within the industry. So Africa Johnson, thank you so much for talking with us today about Black Dandyism, this year's Met Gala. You are an entertainment consultant, former manager, and publicist. Looking forward to speaking with you in the future.
Thank you.
Of course.
Bye.
Coming up, Michigan's public schools are in trouble, and a new report says the stakes are historically high. We'll learn why. We'll be right back on the Metro. You all stay right there.